Did you know that one of Hollywood's most surprising bromances has lasted for more than 30 years? That's right. Brad Pitt and Johnny Depp, two of the biggest stars of their generation, two actors who couldn't be more different in their choices, their careers, and even their public images, and yet they've managed to hold on to a friendship that has outlived the spotlight. It's rare. Really rare in a place like Hollywood. Think about it. Most of the time, when you hear stories about Hollywood friendships, they don't last. Careers get in the way, fame builds distance, egos clash, or sometimes the whole friendship is really just a publicity stunt built for cameras and headlines. But Brad and Johnny's connection? It's different. It's quieter. It's not the type of bond that makes tabloid covers every week, and maybe that's why it has survived so long. What makes it even more fascinating is how the media always tried to paint them as rivals. Brad was the golden boy, the clean-cut star who could do romantic dramas and thrillers, the guy studios trusted to bring in box office numbers. Johnny was the outsider, the rebel who refused to be boxed in, who chased weird, eccentric roles that often scared studios at first, but made him unforgettable. Brad was the safe bet. Johnny was the wild card. On paper, it feels like they should have been competitors, not friends. But reality tells a completely different story. Let's go back to the early 90s when both of them were climbing fast. Brad was coming off films like A River Runs Through It and Legends of the Fall. He was being molded into a leading man, the kind Hollywood hadn't seen since Robert Redford. Johnny, meanwhile, had just transformed himself from a TV heartthrob on 21 Jump Street into a serious actor. He proved himself in Edward Scissorhands and What's Eating Gilbert Grape. He wasn't chasing stardom, though. He hated the idea of being branded as a movie star. He wanted to disappear into characters, to challenge himself, to be remembered as an artist, not a celebrity. Now, most people would assume their paths never really crossed, but in Hollywood, circles overlap. They ran into each other at parties, events, through mutual friends, and what sparked wasn't rivalry. It was respect. Brad admired Johnny's ability to take chances, to play the weird, almost unmarketable characters that no one else would dare to touch. Johnny respected Brad's determination to break out of his pretty boy image and push for roles that carried real weight, like in Seven or Fight Club. They weren't stepping on each other's toes, because they weren't chasing the same roles. They carved out completely different lanes, which left room for admiration instead of jealousy. And beneath all of that, there was another connection. The way they both felt about fame. You see, not every star loves the spotlight. Brad has said many times that he wasn't comfortable being seen as just another handsome face. He wanted more than that. He wanted to create art, to tell meaningful stories. Johnny? He spent most of his life rejecting the movie star label. He called it a trap. For him, fame was never the goal. Both of them were searching for something real, something authentic, in a world that thrives on image. That's a powerful thing to have in common, especially when everyone else around you is obsessed with climbing higher and shining brighter. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Over the years, when life got messy, when the cameras were harsh, when headlines turned ugly, that's when you see who's truly in your corner. Johnny went through some of the most brutal years of his career. Lawsuits, court battles, endless tabloid coverage. It felt like the world was watching his personal life collapse, and a lot of people in Hollywood pulled away. Some were scared to be associated. Some chose silence, but Brad? He didn't abandon him. He didn't try to make a statement to get clout, and he didn't turn it into a performance. He just stayed a friend, quietly, steadily, in a way that didn't need the public's approval, and the same is true for Brad. He had his own share of storms. His divorce, custody battles, the constant flashing cameras following his every move. It was overwhelming, and it turned him into a constant target for gossip magazines. But Johnny didn't turn away either. He stayed present, reminding Brad that away from all the flashing lights and gossip, there were still people who knew him, really knew him. Not the image, not the headlines, but the man. That's what makes this friendship different. It's not about being seen together on red carpets. It's not about hashtags or joint projects. It's about being there when the world isn't watching. That's why it's lasted so long. Now, experts who study celebrity culture often point out that these kinds of friendships almost never make it past a decade. Careers pull stars in opposite directions. Schedules make it impossible. And let's be honest, Hollywood is competitive. People don't always want to see their peers succeed more than them. But Brad and Johnny never had that problem. They didn't need to compete, and they didn't need constant contact to keep their bond strong. They could go months without speaking, years without being photographed together, and then reconnect as if no time had passed. That's the kind of friendship that doesn't fade, no matter what. And here's something Johnny said in an interview years ago. Real friends in this industry? They're rare. But when you find one, you hold on. He didn't give names. But fans couldn't help but wonder if Brad was one of the people he had in mind. It's also worth talking about how their careers shifted over time, because that change is a big part of why their bond survived. Brad Pitt, for example, didn't just stay in front of the camera. As his career matured, he started looking beyond acting. He realized he wanted to have a bigger role in the stories being told, not just as the face delivering the lines, but as someone shaping the projects from the ground up. That's when he leaned heavily into producing. And he didn't just produce random films. He produced the kind of movies that made people stop, think, and feel. Movies that made an impact. Take 12 Years a Slave. That film wasn't just another project, it was a cultural milestone. It was raw, painful, necessary, and powerful. Brad didn't just back it with money. He put his name behind it, which gave the story a wider reach. And it paid off. The movie went on to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. Then came Moonlight, another bold choice. A small film with a huge heart. A story about identity, love, and struggle that might have been overlooked if not for the right people believing in it. And again, it won Best Picture. Brad wasn't in the spotlight in these projects. He wasn't the leading man carrying the film. But his fingerprints were all over them. He showed that he wasn't just a star, he was a storyteller, someone who wanted to nurture meaningful art. That move into producing also gave him freedom. He didn't have to chase roles to stay relevant. He could step back from acting whenever he wanted, knowing that his influence stretched beyond his face on a poster. It gave him more space to breathe, to choose roles more carefully, and to stay in control of his career. Now, look at Johnny Depp. His path was different, but it carried the same sense of freedom. Johnny has always been unpredictable, almost allergic to doing what people expect of him. And as the years went on, that didn't change. Instead of trying to keep up with Hollywood's constant demand for blockbusters, Johnny leaned further into music. That's been his first love since before acting ever came along. He picked up the guitar as a teenager, long before he ever thought about Hollywood. And even at the height of his movie career, music was always there in the background. Eventually, he made it more than just a side hobby. He collaborated with musicians like Alice Cooper and Joe Perry, forming the band Hollywood Vampires. He went on tours. He played shows for thousands of fans who weren't there to see Captain Jack Sparrow or Edward Scissorhands. They were there to hear Johnny as Johnny the musician. That step into music gave him a different kind of creative outlet, one that wasn't controlled by scripts or directors or studios. It was more personal, more freeing. At the same time, Johnny started choosing smaller, independent projects in film. Movies that weren't chasing box office numbers. Projects that let him experiment, explore, and push himself without the pressure of carrying a billion-dollar franchise. In many ways, stepping away from the mainstream was a way to reclaim himself. Hollywood had turned him into this global figure, but deep down he never really wanted that. By moving toward music and indie work, he found a balance. So here you have two men, both massive stars in their own right, deliberately moving away from the Hollywood machine. Brad choosing producing, Johnny choosing music and smaller projects. Both of them creating more space in their lives, both of them easing away from the constant competition of the industry. And that's important, because when you're not competing with someone, it's easier to remain friends. There's no tension, no jealousy, no silent comparison. Just respect. And here's the thing about friendships, especially in a place like Hollywood. When you remove that layer of rivalry, you give the friendship room to breathe. Brad wasn't worried about Johnny taking his roles. Johnny wasn't worried about Brad overshadowing him. They weren't running in the same lane anymore, so they could cheer each other on without hesitation. That shift kept their friendship intact, but there's another side to this too. By stepping back from the constant demand to be in the spotlight, both Brad and Johnny had more time to focus on the things that actually mattered. They had more time for family, for personal growth, for healing, and yes, for the friendships that really meant something. Hollywood can be brutal when it comes to personal lives. The industry chews people up and spits them out, and if you're not constantly visible, people assume you're fading. But Brad and Johnny both found ways to define success on their own terms. That's something most actors struggle with, and it's one more reason their paths stayed aligned. Think about the timing, too. Brad started producing just as Johnny was diving deeper into music. Both moves pulled them away from the center of Hollywood's chaos. Instead of being in direct competition for attention, they created their own spaces. That allowed them to connect in a more genuine way because their friendship wasn't tied to the industry. It wasn't dependent on red carpets or joint projects. It became something that existed outside of Hollywood. And that's rare. That's really rare. Most friendships in this business are built on convenience, shared projects, shared press tours, shared parties. And when those end, the friendship fades too. But Brad and Johnny's bond survived because it wasn't tied to those things. It was built on something deeper: respect, understanding, loyalty. The recognition that both of them were just trying to hold on to themselves in a world that constantly tried to strip that away. So when you put it all together, their career choices weren't just professional decisions. They were also personal ones. Brad becoming a producer, Johnny diving into music. Those choices created freedom. And freedom gave their friendship a chance to grow without pressure, without competition, and without the noise of Hollywood dragging it down. It's almost poetic, isn't it? Two men who started out as Hollywood's brightest stars, who could have been rivals, who could have let the industry pit them against each other, instead carved out separate paths that kept them close. And in doing so, they showed that even in a place as cutthroat as Hollywood, friendship can survive, if you make the space for it. But let's not ignore the fun side of all this. Fans have always wanted to see them work together. Imagine a movie with Brad and Johnny in the same cast. Imagine the internet's reaction. Twitter would explode. TikTok would be filled with edits and fan theories. For years, rumors have swirled about projects that might have put them together, but nothing has materialized. Maybe it's just better that way. Maybe the mystery of what if is part of the magic. Or maybe, just maybe, Hollywood still has a surprise waiting for us. Both men are in their 60s now, but careers don't always slow down with age. Sometimes the best collaborations come when you least expect them. So what does their story really show us? That even in an industry built on competition and image, real friendships can survive. Not flashy, attention-grabbing friendships. Not the kind where you constantly post selfies together for followers, but the kind that's steady, loyal, quiet, the kind that proves you don't need the spotlight to keep a bond alive, and it makes you think, doesn't it? How many of us have friendships like that? The kind where you don't need to talk every day, but when you do, it feels like no time has passed. The kind where you can trust someone to stand by you even when the rest of the world steps back. Now here's where I want to hear from you. Do you think we'll ever see Brad Pitt and Johnny Depp star in a film together? Or do you think their friendship is better left off screen, away from all the noise? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this look into one of Hollywood's most underrated bromances, you'll definitely want to check out my other video on Johnny Depp's emotional confessions about fame and family. It's raw, it's honest, and it gives you another side of Johnny you don't always get to see. Before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. That way you never miss these deep dives into the untold stories of Hollywood. Because at the end of the day, these stars may seem larger than life, but they're people too. People with friendships, struggles, and stories that go way beyond the headlines.